Either you're gonna go to a restaurant and order steak or you're gonna grill up steak. And honestly, you're probably gonna have a better steak if you grill it at home, especially if you follow one of these 3 cooking methods that I'm gonna share with you today. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Barbecue Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Christie Vanover, champion pitmaster, cookbook author, the girl behind one of America's top barbecue websites, GirlsCanGrill.com, and a contestant on Food Network's Barbecue Brawl. I'm here to bring you some quick barbecue tips to help you up your barbecue game. Since Valentine's Day is just around the corner, if you're listening to this on the day my podcast drops, which is every Thursday, then Valentine's Day is tomorrow, and I'm going to help you guys get ready with some last-minute steak tips. But before I do, though, I wanted to jump in and share some exciting news. I, every now and then, participate in the Pitmasters podcast. If you guys currently don't subscribe to that, please head on over. You're going to want to listen to that one, too. Each episode is about an hour long, and Anthony interviews different guests, and it's just really fun. You learn a lot about barbecue, you learn about competition barbecue, restaurant barbecue, a whole variety of things. But there is a panel that I'm part of about once a month where we taste different barbecue rubs. So different pitmasters out there who have launched their barbecue lines, or some who have had barbecue lines for a long time, they will send their rubs to the different members of the panel, and we taste them on air. We haven't cooked with them yet. As far as when we're tasting them, we open the bottles fresh for the first time, we taste them, we give everybody our opinions, and just tell them what we think about them. And honestly, every rub that I've tried on the show as a panel member has been outstanding. They all have their different purposes. Some are sweet, some are spicy, some are savory, but they've all been really phenomenal. But the exciting thing is, the episode that just aired on Monday, we actually did a blind tasting with the panel, where the host, Anthony, he took different rubs, from rubs that we've tried as panel members to rubs that he just happens to have in his pantry, or rubs that he picked up at the store, and he sent us all envelopes with just the numbers 1 through 10 on them. And we did like a bracket challenge like you would see in like NCAA Sweet 16 kind of bracket challenge, where we tasted one rub against another rub, and it was a one-on-one head-to-head to see which rub of those two we liked best. And then whichever rub was the best, it advanced to the next round, and so on until we got to the finals. Well, there was one rub, which was rub number 1. That one, everybody sweeped hands down its initial head-to-head. Everybody voted yes. And so that one actually got a bye, and it got to skip the next 2 rounds and went all the way to the finals. That was Blazing Star's pork and rub. My rub was rub number 4. I was actually in the first round against rub number 7, and I made it through 3 different rounds until I was head-to-head with Blazing Star, who got the bye. The rub that was entered for mine, which I didn't know at the time, like I said, it was all blind, was my pork rub. And my pork rub went head-to-head with Mike Starr's pork rub, which is really cool that it was 2 pork rubs that made it to the top, and 2 Nevada barbecue teams. Well, in the end, my pork rub, took grand champion, first place 2025 Pitmasters Podcast Championship rub. So super stoked about that. Congrats to Mike Starr and all the other rubs that were there. They were all really, really good, but Mike Starr's rub is definitely really good. Blazing Star's pork and rub. But if you guys want to try out my pork rub, if you have not done so yet, you can get it on my website, shop.girlscangrill.com. You can also find it on Amazon, and it's in several local barbecue stores, so be sure to check my website and see if there's a store near you. All right, let's move on to that Valentine's Day dinner. A lot of you out there are probably thinking about grilling up steak. Either you're going to go to a restaurant and order steak, or you're going to grill up steak. And honestly, you're probably going to have a better steak if you grill it at home, especially if you follow one of these 3 cooking methods that I'm going to share with you today. First of all, if you want to have a successful steak cook, I highly recommend going with a ribeye. They are more expensive than like a sirloin or even a strip, but the flavor is just superior because it's got a lot more marbling in it. And actually, when they go to grade a whole cow, to decide if it's select, choice, prime, etc., they actually look at the ribeye as part of the standards and how much marbling is in the ribeye cut itself. That's how important that cut of meat is to the whole cow itself. So if you can afford it this year, go for a ribeye. I like to look for ones that are like 3/4 inch to 1 1/4 inch thick. I feel like that's the premium thickness, so that way you can get a nice sear on the outside and get a nice even cook throughout. If you want to go with something really thick, like maybe a tomahawk, which is those ribeyes that have the really long bones on them and they can be up to 2 inches thick, then you're going to want to use the reverse sear method, which I will talk about as my second method today. If you do want to go with like a sirloin or a strip or even a filet mignon, All of these methods will work for that as well. Bottom line is you just have to be mindful of the internal temperature, and we will get into that. So let's get cooking. You've got your steaks picked out. The first thing that you need to do is maybe trim them a little. If you see too much excess fat on them, I like to trim a little bit of that away, but usually when you buy them from the grocery store or even buy them online, they're trimmed up pretty good, so you're not gonna have to take too much time with that. But next up is the seasoning. You can absolutely go with just like a kosher salt and black pepper, but I highly recommend going with my brisket rub. It was made for all things beef. And what I do, instead of just putting the brisket rub straight on the steak, which absolutely you can do, is I like to make a slurry. So I'll take a small bowl and I'll mix in some olive oil, soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and then a tablespoon or so of my brisket rub. And then I just mix that around with a spoon and I rub that all over the steak. Both sides, make sure you get the sides as well, kind of press it in there, and then I just leave it on a pan and leave it on the counter while I heat up the grill. The reason you want to leave it on the counter to rest at room temperature is you want to get off some of that chill. If it's been in the refrigerator, the internal temperature of your steak is probably 38, 39 degrees. If you throw that straight on a hot grill, the outside is going to cook fast, but the inside's going to take a little bit longer for that heat to actually convect to the inside of the meat. But if you leave it on the counter, break off some of that chill, let it temper just a little bit to where that internal temperature is going to be, in the upper 40s, maybe even 50s, depending on how long you leave it on the counter, then it will cook a lot more evenly. So the first method we're going to talk about when you're cooking a steak is just the regular old grilling method, direct heat on the grill. You can use a gas grill or a charcoal grill. Personally, I like charcoal because I like that extra little flavor that the charcoal gives, but you're going to light your grill and you're going to heat it to about, 375, 400 degrees, basically like a medium-high heat temperature. You don't want it too hot to where it's going to burn your steak or that those fats are going to drip too much. You want to just have it kind of at a medium-high level. Then you put your seasoned steak right on the grill and you let it cook for about 5 to 7 minutes per side, depending on how done you like your steaks to be. A good rule of thumb is a rare steak is about 120 to 125. Then once you go up in 10-degree increments, that's when you're going to get to your medium rare, your medium well, and your well done. Well done is basically everything 155 and over. I like to aim for about 127 to 130. And the reason I go for that odd number is there's going to be carryover cooking. So when you take your steak off the grill, the thermodynamics of the heat are still active, and so it's still going to be raising the temperature of your steak another 3 to 5 degrees after you take it off of the grill. So 127 to 130 is my magic mark. My husband prefers it a little bit more a little bit less pink, so I keep his on there a little bit longer. The best way to figure out the internal temperature of your steak is to use a digital meat thermometer. I use a ThermoPen 1, or I also like to use my RFX, which is my wireless meat thermometer. Now, if you want to create those beautiful diamond grill marks on a steak, what you're going to do is during that first 5 to 7 minutes that it's cooking, after 3 minutes or so, you're going to rotate the steak about 90 degrees. Don't flip it over, just rotate it. Then once it's cooked another 3 minutes or so, you'll flip it over and you should see those beautiful sear marks. If for some reason it didn't quite make the sear marks you wanted, don't worry, you have a chance to do it on the second side. So same thing, once you flip it over, grill it for about 3 minutes or so, and then rotate it 90 degrees until you get sear marks. Once you flip that over, you can see which sear marks you like the best, which diamond marks look the best, and serve it that side up. Now, if you find that the steak needs a little bit more time, but it's flaring up or there's just too much grease because it is a ribeye and it's fattier, it's good to set your grill up with a 2-zone cooking area. What that means is that you have a section of the grill where the heat's not on. So if you're in a charcoal cooking environment, you'll have a section of the grill where you don't have any coals underneath the burner. If you're on a gas grill, you'll just have one of the burners turned off. That way, if you're seeing flare-ups, you can kind of move those steaks over to that side. There's still heat inside the grill that's going to be circulating, so it's still cooking your steak, but you're not getting that intensity of the heat that you might get with that direct cooking. Another thing you can do to stop flare-ups is to close the lid. The more you have your lid open on your grill, the more oxygen that is feeding into those coals. When that mixes with the grease drippings, that's also going to create more heat and more fire. So keep that lid closed and you'll actually make the flare-ups kind of stop. The final thing that you can do is just keep a water bottle handy and you can kind of squirt down the flare-ups. However, water and grease don't exactly mix, so spraying grease on flare-ups is a temporary fix, but the flare-ups usually just happen back right away. I usually only do that if it's really severe, and then I move my steak off of the direct heat until it actually subsides itself with just, shutting off the oxygen, or even turning down the temperature if you've got a gas grill, or even just closing down the vents just a little bit more if you need to if you have a charcoal grill. Once your steak has reached the desired temperature, you're going to take it off the grill, set it on a pan, and tent it loosely with foil. And then you do want to let it rest. I like to let it rest for 5 to 15 minutes. That way the juices are like chilling out, calming down, and actually like redistributing into the meat. They're like staying in the meat. If you were to cut right into your steak immediately when you take it off the grill, those juices are just so active and so energized that they're just going to continue to flow right out. They're just going to want to move, and they're going to end up all over your cutting board. So give it some time to just like settle, let the temperature, that carryover temperature, do its magic, and then just like the juices will be like, okay, you can cut into me now. Now, some of the juices are going to come out still, absolutely, and you can sop your meat right into that and it's delicious, but you're not going to have as many escape the meat if you just let it rest. Next up is the reverse sear. When you have a thicker steak, or you want to add some smoke flavor to your steak when you're grilling it, you're going to want to use the reverse sear method. With this method, we're going to start by cooking it over indirect heat, infusing some smoke and slowly bringing it to temperature, and then you're going to finish it over hot direct heat where you're searing it and you're forming that crust. If you have a gas grill, you're not going to get smoke unless you actually use like wood chips in a foil pouch. With that setup, you're going to set one burner on and one burner off, and you're going to have your wood chips over the burner that's on, and you're going to cook your steak with the reverse sear method by slowly smoking it over the side where the burners are off. If you've got a charcoal grill, same thing, charcoal under one part of the grate, none under the other part of the grate, and you're going to put your steak over the part where there's no coals. The reverse sear method is great if you have a pellet grill or a ceramic cooker, because you're going to start the temperature at 250 degrees when you're going to smoke the steak, and then once it reaches your desired temperature, you're going to crank that heat up to about 400 degrees for you to get the sear. With a ceramic cooker, it's really hard to go from hot to colder, but if you started at 250, it's really easy to raise that temperature up to 400. When it comes time to cook it, you're going to season it up and then put it over that indirect heat. I like to let it cook until it reaches an internal temperature of about 110 degrees. The best way I find to measure that is with my ThermoWorks RFX, which is a wireless meat thermometer. You can also use a wired meat thermometer, but you're just going to insert the probe sideways into the meat, kind of horizontal to the center of the steak. Make sure it doesn't land in a fat pocket, because that can kind of set the reading off a little bit. Make sure it's just in the center of the meat itself, and then set your alarm to 110. Once it reaches that point, you're going to take the steak off and you're going to increase your heat. You're either going to move your steak over the direct heat of the charcoal or the direct heat of your gas grill, or you're going to crank the heat on your pellet grill or your ceramic cooker, and then you're going to let it sear over that 400 degrees or higher temperature until you get a good crust. You're going to put it on there, and you're just going to kind of flip it over every 30 to 90 seconds, depending on how intense your heat is, and you're just looking to get a crust, and you're looking to get it to that final desired temperature. This is why I like to use a wireless meat thermometer, because we are going to be flipping it. I find the wire kind of gets in the way. So with the wireless one, you just can flip it and nothing's getting in the way there. So set your temperature on this one to your desired temperature, whatever your desired doneness is. Again, I like to be around 127, 130 because I like my steak medium rare. Then once it reaches that temperature, you take it off, tent it with foil, and let it rest for a good 10 to 15 minutes before you serve it up. The last way to cook up a steak is actually my favorite way to have steak, and that is seared in a cast iron skillet. I love the Maillard reaction that you get on the crust of a steak when it's in a hot cast iron pan. So let's talk through those steps. You're going to want to put your cast iron either on your grill or on your stovetop. Either way works for this. And you're going to want to crank that heat up until your cast iron is 500 degrees. The best way to measure this is to use an infrared gun. I have a ThermoWorks IR pen. I also have a ThermoWorks infrared gun. You just shoot that laser straight towards the pan, and once it registers a temperature of 500 degrees, it's ready for your steak. I like to add a little bit of oil to the pan. You're going to want to use a high heat oil. I like to use avocado oil. You can also use canola oil. Olive oil is not the best because it doesn't have as high of a smoke point, so try a high heat oil. Just a little bit to give a little glisten, and then you're going to add your steak that's already seasoned right into the pan. When you add your steak, you want to use your tongs to press the steak flat in the pan, because the steak is not necessarily perfectly flat, but if you press it down, you're going to get that full surface area in direct contact with the cast iron, and that's where you get the beautiful sear. You let it ride there for just a couple of minutes. You can kind of peek at it to see how that sear is happening, and once you like it, then you give it a flip over and you do the other side. Same thing, press down on it so you get that nice even crust. Then you're going to want to actually tip it on its side, and I like to sear the edges. I kind of lean it against the edge of the pan until you get that fat edge, especially on a ribeye, seared up nicely, and that bite is so delicious. Then if you want to get extra fancy, you can add some butter, garlic, and fresh herbs like thyme or rosemary to the skillet. You want to use a hot glove because your cast iron's going to be really hot. Grab that pan and kind of tilt it on its side just a little bit, and get a big tablespoon, not a measuring tablespoon, but like a big soup spoon, and use that spoon to just baste the butter right on top of the meat. It's going to be that nice garlicky, herby butter that's just going to be basted on that perfectly seared steak, and it adds so much flavor. The only thing with this part is you do need to be a little bit cautious. I sometimes turn my heat down on my stove or on my grill just a little bit because you don't want the garlic to burn. Because if your garlic burns, then you have kind of a rancid butter taste. So that's the part you have to watch for. If you're a little bit nervous about that, use some garlic powder or even leave the garlic out altogether and just try it with some herbs. But it's fantastic. Then again, once your steak reaches your desired temperature, again for me it's medium rare, you take it off the stove. You let it rest for a good 10-15 minutes, and then you can serve it up. And if there's any leftover butter in the pan, go ahead and slice your steak when you serve it, and then drizzle that leftover butter right on top with a little pinch of sea salt. And it's beautiful. It would make a fantastic Valentine's Day dinner. Now, if you want to go surf and turf, make sure you guys listen to the podcast that I did just a couple weeks ago where I talked all about grilled shrimp. That's a nice, easy, quick thing to go with your steaks that will make it beautiful. If you want to add some vegetables, be sure to listen to my grilled vegetable episode that I did at the first of the year. That's going to give you some tips for that. Otherwise, I love serving up a surf and turf with a great wedge salad. You just get yourself an iceberg lettuce head, cut that into quarters, throw on some blue cheese, some crumbled bacon and blue cheese dressing, and some diced tomatoes, and it's like the easiest salad to make, but for some reason, it's so stinking good. And if you don't like blue cheese, I'm sorry you're missing out, but that's okay. You can also use ranch, leave off the blue cheese crumbles, and just put some ranch dressing on there, and it'll be awesome as well. I hope you guys have a beautiful Valentine's Day with your partners. If you don't have a partner, that's no problem. Cook yourself up a steak because you know what? You deserve it too. As always, guys, you can find these recipes and hundreds more at GirlsCanGrill.com, along with so many barbecue tips. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to my Barbecue Tips podcast so you never miss an episode. And as always, you can find me on all the socials at GirlsCanGrill. Until next week, guys, happy grilling.